All right. How's everyone doing this morning? Today we are going to read through Chapter 7 of Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Let me just focus this here. Okay. So, if this is your first time watching, we are not just going to read the words, but we are going to talk about interesting vocabulary words or interesting phrases that we encounter as we go. And if you're watching this live with me, then I really encourage you to ask questions and make comments in the chat, because that is what is unique and interesting about reading the book like this. We get to talk about the things that we're reading. So,
the $10,000 in 30 days free blueprint is going viral right now. You've probably seen other TikTok
about. I have my little technical difficulties. Okay. So please make comments. Please ask questions. If you don't ask questions, I will just talk about words that I think you might find interesting or useful, or phrases that I think maybe aren't clear for you. So, and of course, I don't really know what you know, and sometimes these questions are very interesting. So please do that. Okay, now in the last chapter, they were flying to New Mexico to a savage reservation. So they're going to visit these primitive people who live like people used to live in the old days. People like us. So that they want to go there and watch the animals in their natural habitat. And, oh no, I forgot the name of the main character. But he learned that he's losing his job because he isn't conforming enough to the ideas of the people of, well, I don't know, the political party or the political philosophy at the time. So he's gone and done this crazy thing, go to this reservation with a girl, and people suspect that he's in love with her, and he wants to spend intimate times with her, not just have sex with her, but to actually have a relationship with her. And that's a big sin in this society, to have an actual relationship with somebody, because you're only supposed to have sex with many different people, and you're never supposed to form attachments to people. That's very primitive, like the savages that they're about to visit. So this is an exciting chapter, because now we get to see how these people live. All right, well, let's start reading. The mesa was like a ship becalmed in a strait of lion-colored dust. The channel wound between precipitous banks, and slanting from one wall to another wall, the valley ran a streak of green, the river and its fields. Recuerdos says, good morning, Recuerdos. Okay, I think we better go back and take a look at a few of these words. Okay, so the mesa was like a ship becalmed in a strait. Well, mesa is the Spanish word for table, but I think what they use that for in geology is kind of like a mountain, but not a mountain like this, a mountain that has a top like this, like a table. But I guess we better confirm that. I don't know geology. Let's see. Yeah, it's a flat-topped hill. So actually, let's take a picture at a mesa. So here's an example of a mesa. So the mesa was like a ship, becalmed. That's not a word that you would ever use in regular English, but I guess, you can see the word calm in there. So maybe that means like made calm. So the mesa was like a ship becalmed in a strait of lion-colored dust. The channel wound between precipitous banks. Let's look at the word precipitous. Channel, they must be talking about like a river or something when they say channel here. And actually, what did it say? It said the channel wound. Do you know winding? When you're talking about a road or something, you have a straight road, like a direct road, or a straight river, or a direct river. And winding means it's shaped kind of like a snake. So if something is winding around something else, you can imagine that it's moving around like a snake around something. So and wind is an irregular verb, so it's wind, wound, wound. Let's see. Precipitous. What does that mean? Precipitous. Dangerously high or steep. I never would have guessed that. Precipitous. So let's look at that again. The mesa was like a ship becalmed in a strait of lion-colored dust. The channel wound between precipitous banks. So a bank is like the side of a river. Where the water and the river meet, you call that the bank of a river. So the channel like the river, the water, wound between very dangerous high edges, banks. And slanting is when something is diagonal or like in an angle. And slanting from one wall to the other across the valley ran a streak of green, the river and its fields. On the prow of the stone ship in the center of the strait. What is a prow? I guess that must be a ship vocabulary. There's a lot of vocabulary in this first paragraph. The portion of a ship's bow. So let's see if we can find a picture of that. Not that it matters. Not many of us need to know this specific type of ship vocabulary, but this is the prow, the edge here. Okay. It's not a terribly important word. Yen Timen says hello. Hello, Yen. How are you doing this morning or this evening in Vietnam? And Wellington is here from Sao Paulo. Hi, Wellington. How are you doing today? On the prow of that stone ship in the center of the strait, and seemingly part of it, a shaped and geometrical outcrop of naked rock. When something is an outcrop, it means, maybe it's like a straight thing, but then there's something that sticks out, that goes out, and that's an outcrop, something that grows out of another thing. Let's see what kind of pictures we get when we look at pictures of something that is outcropped. Let's see. So I think that, if you look at outcrop here, you've got the flat surface in the front, and then you have something sticking directly out in the back, and maybe you could call that an outcrop. Let's see. Or here, you can see how you've got something flat all around, but then something sticks out, and that's an outcrop. That's how you would use outcrop. Wellington Cardoso says, what is slanting? Let's see. Slant versus... Let's see if we can find something to show a picture. Let's see. I don't know. What is the opposite of slant? Well, let's just look at slant. So slant is when something moves in this direction. So you could also say diagonal, but this is a slant. Diagonal is an adjective. The building has a diagonal. Well, slant can be a noun. It can be a noun or a verb, but it means it doesn't go up and down. It doesn't go horizontal. It has an angle. That's slanting. Look at this. You've got Bigfoot here, and there's a slanted I don't know, range of visibility to Bigfoot. Okay, so that's slanting, diagonal. Not horizontal and not, what is the other word? Horizontal or, I can't even think of it. Oh no. Wait, horizontal, what is the opposite of horizontal? Wait, now it's bothering me. I think I just said it a minute ago, but I can't remember. Opposite of horizontal is vertical. Oh, of course. So it's not horizontal and it's not vertical, it's slanted. Okay. On the prow of the stone ship, in the center of the strait, and seemingly a part of it, a shaped and geometrical outcrop of naked rock, stood the Pueblo of Malpais, block above block, each story smaller than the one below. The tall houses rose... I just lost my place. The tall houses rose like a stepped, amputated pyramids in the blue sky. Amputate is when you remove something. So when somebody removes an arm or a leg, they usually refer to amputation. So an amputated pyramid would be a pyramid, but then maybe somebody removed the top. Because they said each floor of the building is smaller than the floor below it. So these buildings are shaped like pyramids. But they don't have the peak at the top. At their feet lay a straggle of low buildings. Straggle is like an unorganized line of something. And maybe as you move away from it, there are fewer things, but it's very unorganized. So I don't trust my straggle definition. I better look. Straggle becomes separated from the others typically because of moving more slowly, something that grows or spreads irregularly. Yeah, so can you imagine, like, if you look at a map, if you go to Google Earth and you look at a big city, in the center you see all the buildings, but as you move out, it becomes less organized, fewer buildings, and maybe in not the same organization as in a city, so it doesn't seem to have any connection the way that in the center of the city the buildings are connected. So you could say that they start to straggle. They start to lose that organization. So at their feet, so on top of the mesa, you have the city with all the buildings, but at the foot of the mesa, you have these straggling buildings, kind of unorganized here and there, not very close together. Let's see. At their feet lay a straggle of low buildings, a crisscross of walls. Crisscross, that's just when two things cross each other. A crisscross of walls, and on three sides of the precipices fell sheer into the plain. A few columns of smoke mounted perpendicularly into the windless air and were lost. Queer, said Lenina. Queer means strange. Very queer, very strange. It was her ordinary word of condemnation. Condemnation is when you disapprove of something, when you say it's bad, when you don't like it. So when Lenina says that she doesn't like, when Lenina is confronted with something she doesn't like, she says, "Oh, how queer." That's her way of showing disapproval. It was her ordinary word of condemnation. I don't like it. And I don't like that man. She pointed to the Indian guide who had been appointed to take them up to the Pueblo. Here people, her feeling was evidently reciprocated. The very back of the man as he walked along before them was hostile, sullenly contemptuous. If you're sullen, you're sad. And if you're contemptuous, you have hate. So this man, she's uncomfortable around this man because, number one, he was hostile. That means he wasn't being kind. He was being very aggressive with them. And he was sullen. He wasn't happy. He looked a little bit angry or sad. And he was contemptuous. You could feel hate coming from him. Besides, she lowered her voice, he smells. Bernard did not attempt to deny it. They walked on. Suddenly, it was as though the whole air had come alive and were pulsing. You know, pulse is boom, 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 boom. You can see your pulse. This is your pulse. You feel for your pulse here. So pulse is boom, 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 boom. And here it says that the air had come alive and was pulsing. So I don't know what pulsing air could be like, but pulsing with the indefatigable movement of blood. Okay, I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean. We've seen that word before, indefatigable. Fatigue means tired, and indefatigable means never becomes tired. Never gets tired. That's a pretty fancy word, but you could use it. I mean, some of these words you probably wouldn't use in regular conversation. You could use indefatigable if you want, but then people will say, oh, you have such a beautiful, fancy vocabulary. It isn't a terribly common word. Up there in Malpais, the drums were being beaten. Okay, that's why they're using the word pulsing, because in Malpais, they're beating the drum. So boom, 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 boom. It's a pulse. Their feet fell in with rhythm of that mysterious heart. They quickened their pace. Their path led them to the foot of the precipice. The precipice is like the edge. The sides of the great mesa of the great mesa ship towered over them 300 feet to the gunwale. Okay, I don't know what a gunwale is. We have to look at that. I guess it must be some type of geological term. Gunwale, upper edge or side of a boat. Okay, so let's see. It's boat vocabulary. Because, you know, he's comparing this mesa to a ship. He says it looks like a ship. So he keeps using ship vocabulary to refer to it. So we better look and see what a gunwale is. Even though, of course, you probably won't ever use that word. But since we're here and since we're doing it, we should take a look. Just a second here. Wait, let me try this again. Gunwale. All right. So it's just this edge of the ship is called a gunwale. I don't know if that will ever be handy for you. Maybe like boating. Whoops. Close the wrong window. Okay. The sides of the great mesa ship towered over them. 300 feet. You know, we've had that word tower before as a verb, because you know that tower is like a very tall building, but you can use it like a verb to mean something is very big, something is very tall, and it makes everything else seem extremely small. So let's see. Where's the largest building in the world now? Tallest building in the world. I mean, we've talked about this word before, but this is a pretty common word, so it's worth talking about it. So do they have the name of this building? Okay. Well, it says the Burj Khalifa, but I thought the tallest building in the world was like in Malaysia or Singapore now or something. But okay, this is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. And you can say, the Burj Khalifa towers over the city. That means it's so tall, it's so big, it makes everything else look very small. You know, these are pretty tall buildings next to the Burj Khalifa. But because of the Burj Khalifa, it looks small. And that's why you say the Burj Khalifa towers over the city or over the other buildings. It's so big, it makes the other buildings look small. That's pretty useful. So here we can understand from this where was it? The sides of the great Mesa ship towered over them. So this gunwale that's like the edge of the ship, remember, it's so tall above them. It's like they're in a volcano or something, because the sides are so tall that it makes them seem very small, or it makes everything else seem very small. I wish we could have brought the plane, said Lenina, looking up resentfully at the blank, impending rock face. So if you're resentful, that means you're angry about something that happened in the past, and you will not let go. So maybe when they were going, she thought, oh, can't we take the plane? And they said, no, we can't take the plane. And that made her angry. And she's not letting go of that anger. She's keeping that anger. So she's saying, I wish we could have taken the plane, because earlier she wanted to take the plane and they said no. And she will not forget that. So she is resentful. That's what resentful means. I wish we could have taken the plane, she said resentfully, at the blank, impending rock face. I hate walking, and you feel so small when you're on the ground at the bottom of a hill. They walked along for some way in the shadow of the mesa, rounded a projection, and there, in a water-worn ravine, was the way up the companion ladder. They climbed, and it was a very steep path that zigzagged. Okay, now earlier Wellington Cardoso said, what is slanting? And I said, well, you have horizontal, and you have vertical, and then you have slanting. Slanting is like diagonal, if you know that word, diagonal. So, usually if you see a mountain, it has like this. It has some kind of angle like this. But if it's more like this is not easy to walk up. This is called steep. If the angle is like this, it's very steep. If it's like this is diagonal or slanting. That would be easy to walk up. But if it were like this, that would be really difficult to walk up. So steep means a very inconvenient angle for walking up. Maybe you could think of it like that. Steep stairs. Wellington, you're in Sao Paulo, right? I imagine, I don't know about Sao Paulo, but I think maybe if you went to Rio, because there are a lot of mountains and hills, that sometimes you would have to walk up not very comfortable stairs, not stairs where it's easy to walk, but very steep stairs, which make you tired. You say, oh, these stairs, they're so steep. I have to rest. So, let's see. They walked for some way in the shadow of the mesa, rounded a projection, and there, in a water-worn ravine, was the way up the companion ladder. They climbed, and it was a very steep path. So they're walking up the mesa, they're walking up towards the top of the mesa, and it's very steep. It's very uncomfortable to walk that way. And it zigzags, and zigzagging is like the shape of a Z. So if something is zigzagging, it moves like this. Okay, so they climbed. It was a very steep path that zigzagged. So it's like the shape of a Z, zigzag. You can remember that word zigzag, which is a pretty common word to describe that shape, because it's the shape of a Z. Actually, let's look at a picture now that we're talking about it. We might as well look at a zigzag or two. See, a zigzag is always the shape of a Z, which makes it easy to remember. So that's that's a sideways Z. These are all zigzags. So you can imagine what a zigzagging path is. It's like you're always following the letter Z. Okay. It was a very steep path that zigzagged from side to side of the gully. Sometimes the pulsing of the drums was all but inaudible. So, that word audit that you see in many things like auditorium, audition, audio, that means to hear. And when you have able at the end of a word, that means can. And this has a negative prefix in with it. So inaudible means you can't hear it. So let's see, the drums. Sometimes the pulsing of the drums was all but inaudible. So sometimes you could almost not hear the drums. Inaudible. The drums were inaudible. The drums were almost inaudible. All but inaudible. All but means almost. At others, they seem to be beating only just round the corner. So sometimes, because of the zigzag shape of the path, sometimes they would walk very far away and they could almost didn't hear the drums. But sometimes they would be very close and it would sound like the drums were next to them. When they were halfway up, an eagle flew past, so close to them that the wind of his wings blew a chill in their faces. In a crevice of the rock lay a pile of bones. A crevice is a space, like a gap, in between two things. It's used a lot when you're talking about rocks, or if you go hiking or something, you will see a lot of crevices in rocks. Like, for example, here is a flower growing in the crevice. Here's a crevice in the snow or in the ice. Yeah, these are crevices in the ice. Here's a crevice. But it isn't just used for geology. It isn't just used for nature. It could be used for any little small space between things. Look, this is an attachment for a vacuum cleaner used for cleaning crevices. You call this a crevice tool. So it's a very useful word. It's a word that's used quite a bit, and it's used to talk about the small spaces between things. Why is this little building showing up with crevice? They call this crevice house. Maybe they call it crevice house because it's very tall and skinny and slender and slim, so it could fit in a crevice. That's probably why they call it crevice house. Well, you get the idea of crevice. Okay, but here we're talking about nature. And how did they use crevice? What did they say about that? In a crevice of the rock lay a pile of bones. It was all oppressively queer. Remember, queer means strange. And the Indians smelt stronger and stronger. They emerged at last from the ravine into the full sunlight. The top of the mesa was a flat deck of stone. Wellington Cardoso says that in Sao Paulo there are more mesa in some regions nearest the sea, the mountains, like this story place, but with a lot of green. Yeah, I have some students in Sao Paulo, and they tell me that, like, when you I've looked at pictures of this because we were talking about it. Like, if you want to go to the beach from Sao Paulo, like Sao Paulo is kind of in a hilly, mountainous region, but then when you go to the beach, there's this sudden place where suddenly all of the mountains stop and the land becomes flat, and that's where the beach area starts. I forget the name. There are a couple of towns right there. Right outside of Sao Paulo, but I forget the names of them. But I know what you're describing, I think. Okay. Like the Charrington Tower was Lenina's comment, but she was not allowed to enjoy her discovery of this reassuring resemblance. Oh, like the Charrington Tower. So she is comparing this mesa structure to one of the towers in London. So she says, oh, like the Charrington Tower was Lenina's comment, but she was not allowed to enjoy her discovery of this reassuring resemblance for long. A padding of soft feet made them turn round, naked, from the throat to the navel. So the navel, or the throat is this, and the navel, I better get a picture of a navel. This is a navel. But most people, probably a doctor would say navel, but most people call it a belly button. Belly is a funny word for stomach, and a button is, in case you don't know what a button is, I guess we better look at buttons for a minute. These are buttons. So belly is a funny word for stomach. And button, these are buttons. So most people would call that a belly button. But that's very childish. It sounds like something a child would say. But I don't think most people say navel. So naked, from the throat to the navel to the belly button, their dark brown bodies painted with white lines, like asphalt tennis courts, Lenina was later to explain. Their faces inhuman with daubings of scarlet, or dabbings, I think I would say dabbings of scarlet. When you dab something, it's when you take your finger and you do this. So maybe you take some paint and you do this. That's a dab. That's a dab. That's a useful word. Let's see. I'm just going to ask ChatGPT to give me a list of things you dab, because I don't think very quickly on my feet, so let's see. Well, first of all, I want to say dab or daub, D-A-U-B, because to me, I think it would just be D-A-B, but maybe that's an American thing. I don't know. Oh, well, actually, ChatGPT says they're different words. D-A-U-B, daub. Dab can be a verb or a noun. As a verb, it often refers to lightly touching or pressing something with a quick, light motion. Daub, on the other hand, is primarily a verb. It means to smear. Oh, it's not really that big of a difference. But to smear something or spread it thickly or carelessly onto the surface. Okay, so this is dab and this is daub. It's not that big of a difference. Okay, but so you can picture they put paint on their faces by doing that. Okay. Let's see, their faces. Inhuman with daubings of scarlet, black, and ochre, 2 Indians came running along the path. Their black hair was braided with fox fur and red flannel. So braiding, better take a look at that word braiding. These are braids. You know, when you twist your hair in a particular way, these are called braids. So if you say that, what was it? It was the hair was braided with, their black hair was braided with fox fur. That's the hair of a fox. And red flannel, so a red material. Flannel is really kind of like this material, the kind of material that I'm wearing here. So they have that braided in their hair. Some hair from a fox fur. When you talk about animals and hair, you always say fur and not hair. So fox fur is fox hair. Their black hair was braided with fox fur and red flannel. Cloaks of turkey feathers fluttered from their shoulders. Fluttering is this movement. So they're wearing some kind of cloak. I guess we better look at that word. Well, there's a lot of vocabulary here. Or maybe I just have energy, so I'm looking up all of the words. But catch me at the end of the chapter, and I won't be looking up anything. This is a cloak. These are cloaks. So cloaks of turkey feathers fluttered from their shoulders. Huge feather diadems exploded gaudily around their heads. If something is gaudy, it's too colorful or too big or too outrageous, so it's meant to be beautiful, but it actually turns out to be ugly. That's kind of an interesting word. That's a useful word, I would say, gaudy. Let's see what kind of things we get if we look at gaudy. So when something is gaudy, it's supposed to be beautiful, but it's too outrageous, too crazy to be beautiful. So instead it looks ugly. So here's some gaudy jewelry. But maybe the woman who's wearing it, she thinks it's beautiful. But, people, when they see that, they think, oh my God, that's so gaudy. Or look at this car. I mean, the car is kind of cool, but it's too much. It's too shiny, too colorful. Actually, I think it looks kind of cool, but it is a little bit too much. You would call that gaudy. It's supposed to be beautiful, but it turns out to be kind of ugly because it's too much. What is this? I don't think it's a casino. I guess casinos are gaudy. Look at the way he's dressed. It's too colorful, too many colors, too many things. That's gaudy. That's a good word. I have to remember to use that one. So cloaks of turkey feathers fluttered from their shoulders. Huge feather diadems exploded gaudily round their heads. So they're wearing some kind of hat with feathers in it. And the author thinks it looks gaudy. It looks like too much, too crazy. With every step they took came the clink and rattle of silver bracelets. Clinking is this sound. This is clinking. That's clinking. It's also rattling. Clinking is the sound of metal doing that, and rattling could be anything else making that noise. So with every step they took came the clink and rattle of the silver bracelets. Bracelets, that's what you wear around your wrist. Decorations you put around your wrist. Their heavy necklaces of bone and turquoise beads. They came on without a word, running quietly in their deerskin moccasins. Moccasins are Native American slippers or Native American shoes. These are moccasins. So you can buy moccasins in the store. Sometimes people like to use moccasins for, indoors instead of shoes. But then you can see some with a very Native American style, because I think that might even be a Native American word, moccasins. I don't know. I have to look it up. One of them was holding a feather brush. The other carried in either hand what looked at a distance like 3 or 4 pieces of thick rope. One of the ropes writhed uneasily, and suddenly Lenina saw that they were snakes. Writhing is like the movement of a snake. So it looked like the native people were holding ropes, but as they came closer, she realized actually they were writhing because they were snakes. He was holding snakes. The men came nearer and nearer. Their dark eyes looked at her. but without giving any sign of recognition, any smallest sign that they had seen her or were aware of her existence. The writhing snake hung limp again with the rest. The man passed. So these native people came towards them, but then they ignored them and just walked past. As if they didn't even exist, as if they weren't there. "I don't like it," said Lenina. "I don't like it." She liked even less what awaited her at the entrance to the pueblo. Pueblo is just a Spanish word that means like a small village. Where their guide had left them. There are a lot of Spanish words in here. There's mesa for table and pueblo. And the name of the city is Malpais, which means bad country, bad place in Spanish. Where their guide had left them while he went inside for instructions. The dirt, to start with, the piles of rubbish, the dust, the dogs, the flies. Her face wrinkled up into a grimace of disgust. So wrinkles are... Let's see, I'm sure I've got some wrinkles. But I don't think that you can see them clearly, so let's find a picture of wrinkles. If you see the side of this lady's face, you can see that she has a lot of wrinkles. She has a wrinkled face. That's also how you can describe clothes. What if we put clothes here? See, here's a very wrinkled shirt. So these are wrinkles. Now here we're using wrinkle as a verb. Her face wrinkled. So here's an example of wrinkling your nose. So maybe you do that when you're unhappy or you don't like something. See how my nose becomes wrinkled? Let's see. "I don't like it," said Lenina. "I don't like it." She liked even less what awaited her at the entrance to the pueblo, where their guide had left them while he went inside for instructions. The dirt, to start with, the piles of rubbish, the dust, the dogs, the flies. Her face wrinkled into a grimace. A grimace is like an expression of pain and hate and disgust. See how my face is wrinkling into a grimace. She held her handkerchief to her nose. "But how can they live like this?" she broke out in a voice of indignant credulity. When you're indignant, you're angry because you believe that you are right and everyone else is wrong. You believe that you're right about something. So she disapproves of the way that they live, and she feels morally right about it. Ugh, how can they live like this? Why did they choose this? They're stupid. And incredulity means I can't believe it. So she said it with a kind of anger, a kind of righteous anger, and she couldn't believe it. It wasn't possible. Bernard shrugged his shoulders. That's when you do this. That's shrugging your shoulders. Bernard shrugged his shoulders philosophically. "Anyhow," he said, "they've been doing it for the last 5,000 or 6,000 years, so I suppose they must be used to it by now." But cleanliness is next to fordliness. Okay, remember they always replace the word God or Lord with the word Ford. So there is an expression in English which is cleanliness is next to godliness. So meaning if you believe in God, if you're religious, you should always try to keep yourself clean because that brings you closer to God, being clean. But the expression is cleanliness is next to godliness. And here they say, but cleanliness is next to fordliness, she insisted. Yes, and civilization is sterilization. Bernard went on, concluding on a tone of irony the second hypnopedic lesson in elementary hygiene. Sterile, if something is sterile, it means it's completely clean. It is not contaminated at all. It is very pure. So civilization is sterilization. So the only way to have civilization is if you are completely clean. And that's one of the hypnopedic things that's one of the things that they listen to while they're sleeping. They listen to these recordings while they're sleeping. And that's one of the things that they repeat again and again. But those people have never heard of our Ford. That's our Lord, our God. And they aren't civilized, so there's no point in, oh, she gripped his arm, look. An almost naked Indian was very slowly climbing down the ladder from the first floor terrace of a neighboring house, rung after rung. The rungs of the ladder, well, I guess we better look, because sometimes, even if you have advanced vocabulary, sometimes these little words like ladder are not words that you're familiar with. These are ladders. And the place where you step, the place where you put your foot, is called a rung. So the rungs of the ladder. Oh, we've got Hadi here today. Hello, Hadi. How are you doing tonight? Oh, she gripped his arm. Look, an almost naked Indian was very slowly climbing down the ladder from the first floor terrace of a neighboring house, rung after rung, with the tremulous caution of extreme old age. His face was profoundly wrinkled and black, like a mask of obsidian. The toothless mouth had fallen in, and the corners of the lips on each side of the chin, a few long bristles gleamed almost white against the dark skin. The long, unbraided, remember braiding your hair is when you make those little fancy, you tie your hair in a very fancy way. But this is long, unbraided hair. So his hair was not braided, or her hair. Hung down in gray wisps round his face, his hair. His body was bent and emaciated to the bone. If you're emaciated, that means that you don't have any fat. Like, people can see your bones. Very slowly, he came down, pausing at each rung before he ventured another step. "What's the matter with him?" whispered Lena. Her eyes were wide with horror and amazement. "He's old, that's all," Bernard answered as carelessly as he could. He was too startled. He too was startled, but he made an effort to seem unmoved. To be unmoved means to show no emotion. So to be moved means to feel a lot of emotion. I read a moving book. That means I read a book that caused me to feel a lot of emotion, sadness. Usually negative feelings like sadness or depression or crying. So if something is moving, it usually makes you cry or makes you feel sad. A moving story, a moving movie, a movie that makes me cry. But to be unmoved means not to show these negative emotions. So, they're looking at something very sad. This old man, you could see his bones because he's emaciated. And he says, I don't know what's wrong with him, but he doesn't say it with any compassion or feeling. He's unmoved. Hadi asks, braided, plaited? I'm not even sure. Let's see what plaited means. I don't think so, but let's see what plaited hair is. I have an idea, but I'm not sure. Oh, it is a kind of braid. But I guess I'm not an expert on hairstyles, but it seems that when hair is plaited, which is a type, it's just a type of braid. It's a style of braid to do like this. I guess. Because this is mostly what you see when you look up plaited. It looks like this. But I think braided could be in maybe on the sides or in different styles. But it seems like plaited. I don't know. Well, okay, let's ask. I'm going to ask ChatGPT. Boy, after I read like 3 or 4 books like this with all of you, I'm going to be a vocabulary expert. Let's see. Difference between braided and plaited. I've never really seen the word plaited being used. Okay, well, according to ChatGPT, they're almost the same, but there is a very small difference. ChatGPT says that maybe plaited is a little bit informal. I've never even heard that word before used in this way. But also, it could be that when you braid something, you use three groups. You do it with threes. And if you plait something, maybe you're doing more than 3. But it says that people use it interchangeably. So, I don't know. I wouldn't use plaited. I think that if you use plaited, some people will not understand what you mean. I wouldn't. And until you asked, I didn't really know that word. Old, she repeated. But the director is old. Lots of people are old, and they're not like that. Oh, that's because we don't allow them to be like that. We preserve them for diseases. We keep their internal secretions artificially balanced at a youthful equilibrium. We don't permit their magnesium-calcium ratio to fall below what it is at 30. We give them transfusion of young blood. We keep their metabolism permanently stimulated. So of course they don't look like that. Partly, he added, because most of them die long before they reach the old creature's age. Youth almost unimpaired till 60, and then crack, the end. So it seems like in this modern society where they take all of these drugs and have all of these medical treatments, that it's possible to maintain a youthful look for a long time. But then suddenly at the age of 60, things deteriorate very quickly. We say things go downhill very quickly. And then people, I guess, die very close after 60. But Lenina was not listening. She was watching the old man. Slowly he came down. His feet touched the ground. He turned in their deep, sunken orbits. His eyes were still extraordinarily bright. When you see the word orb, that always means something to do with a circle. Probably a 3-dimensional circle. But when he's talking about orbits, he's talking about the eye. I think the eye sockets, not the eyeball, but the eye sockets. Because what does it say? It says, he turned in their deep sunken orbits. So to sink in means to go down. And I don't know if he's talking about the eyes have gone down into the back of his head. Or, sometimes you say sinking, like this area is sagging or sinking. Or this whole area could sink or sag. His feet touched the ground. He turned in their deep sunken orbits. In their deep sunken orbits, his eyes were still extraordinarily bright. So he looked old because his eyes were back in the back of his head. But there was still a lot of light coming from his eyes. They looked at her for a long moment, expressionlessly, without surprise, as though she had not been there at all. And then slowly, with bent back, the old man hobbled past them and was gone. So hobbling is maybe like if you hurt your leg and you try to walk, You will hobble. That's like walking with an injured leg. Let's see if we can find an animation of hobbling. That's not hobbling. Okay, here's an example. Okay, well, let's wait for that to start over. See how Willy Wonka is walking? He's hobbling. That's hobbling. And so it's like an uneven walk because you're in pain. But, I think older people, sometimes they hobble even if there's no problem. And this is an old man, so it's possible that he's not injured or hurt, but he just walks like that because he's old. So then slowly, with bent back, the old man hobbled past them and was gone. But it was horrible, Lenina whispered. It's awful. We ought not to have come here. She felt in her pocket for her soma. So remember, soma is this drug that they take that makes them happy. And they're constantly using soma. So they never feel any negative emotions for very long. And now she's panicking because she feels very uncomfortable. So she wants some of her soma. Only to discover that by some unprecedented oversight, she had left the bottle down at the rest house. Bernard's pockets were also empty. Hadi says hobble, wobbling. Well, wobbling is when something isn't... Wobbling is this movement. And usually you use it when... You don't really use it to talk about people. I mean, you could say he wobbled when he walked. But usually you use that when something is supposed to be attached and it's not supposed to move, but it's moving. Then you say, oh no, it's wobbling. I wonder what happens if we look. But when you say hobbling, I can't think of when you would use that, and you're not talking about an animal or a person walking. Let's see what kind of pictures we get with wobble. Well, unfortunately, we just get things walking. But, here's a good example of wobbling. Jello. I mean, this is really what I think of when I think of wobbling, is something moving like this. But if it's like the part of a car or a machine or an airplane, something like that, if something is moving and it's not supposed to be moving, you would probably call that wobbling. That's when you would use it. Or if you're eating Jell-O. But the other pictures that we get with wobbling are like, what you'll see is probably always this Jell-O movement. So here's wobbling. What does that say? That says, wobble, baby, wobble. But look at his movements. It's really more about the movement of Jell-O than it is about walking in an improper way. That's wobble. So Lenina forgot her drugs at the hotel. Now she's in trouble because she needs her drugs. She feels very uncomfortable. Lenina was left to face the horrors of Malpais unaided. They came crowding in on her thick and fast, the spectacle of two young women giving the breast to their babies made her blush and turn away her face. Spectacle means like a show. I know that like in Spanish they use that to mean like a show, like go to the spectacle, and that means go to the show, go see the fun, the music, the performance, something like that. But when you say spectacle in English, that almost always is a negative thing. It's like some kind of shocking show in public. So if somebody makes a spectacle in public, they're making a show, a performance in public. That's always negative. And here there's a woman, she has some babies and she's breastfeeding them. And Lenina is shocked by this spectacle, by this crazy thing to do in public. Wellington says like dribble in soccer. Well, I don't really know. I don't know too much about sports, so I don't know too much about soccer or any other sport really. But I know that they use dribble in basketball, and I don't know if it's the same thing, but dribbling is this. I don't think you do that in soccer, right? Because you don't use your hands in soccer. So wait, let's see if I do soccer dribble. Let's see what that means. Oh, you do that, but with your feet. That's a bad example. I think I know what it means. Maybe something like this guy is doing. So it's this back and forth, but it's side to side here with soccer, but with basketball, it's up and down. I guess. I don't know too much about sports vocabulary. They came crowding in on her, thick and fast, the spectacle of two young women giving the breast to their babies made her blush. Blush means turn red. And turn away. So she looked away. She couldn't watch. She had never seen anything so indecent in all her life, and what made it worse was that instead of tactfully ignoring it, Bernard proceeded to make open comments on this revoltingly viviparous scene. So to be tactful means to be indirect, to be diplomatic, to say something in a nice, indirect way. So, here, would you like some coffee? No, I hate coffee. That's not tactful. But, here, would you like some coffee? Oh, I'm not very fond of coffee, thanks. So, there's like a nice way to do things that's tactful, and then there's a bad, direct way of doing things. So, Bernard was not being tactful. He wasn't tactfully ignoring this scene. He made some comments on this. Revolting means disgusting. That's another word for disgusting. And it's pretty common. So Bernard proceeded to make open comments on this revoltingly viviparous scene. Ashamed, and now that the effects of the soma had worn off, of the weakness he had displayed in the morning in the hotel, he went out of his way to show himself strong and unorthodox. What a wonderfully intimate relationship. So remember, we've seen this word orthodox before. Orthodox, that's a word about religion. If you're orthodox, that means you follow the religion in a very serious way. You never break the rules. So an unorthodox person doesn't follow the rules. And that's about religion. But you can use unorthodox, a lot of times it's used in talking about social rules. So if somebody is socially unorthodox, it means that they break the typical social rules. So Bernard made some comments that were very unorthodox, and his observation was, what a wonderfully intimate relationship. So Lenina's disgusted. Oh my God, that's disgusting. You have a woman with her baby, and the baby is getting some milk. And Lenina says, oh my God, that's disgusting. I can't stand that. And Bernard says, oh, that's so nice. He said deliberately outrageous. So he's trying to make people angry by observing this. And what an intensity of feeling it must generate. I often think one may have missed something in not having had a mother. And perhaps you've missed something in not being a mother, Lenina. Imagine yourself sitting there with a little baby of your own. Hadi says tactfully using hedge words. I guess I don't think that would be a very common thing to say, using hedge words. But I guess that could be another way of putting it. Bernard, how can you? The passage of an old woman with ophthalmia No, we better look that up. Ophthalmia. I can't even say that word. What is... Oh, that must be some kind of medical condition. Ophthalmia. An inflammation of the eye. Let's see if we can find a picture of... Oh, that's not nice. Okay, I'll show you a disgusting picture. Or a disturbing picture. This is ophthalmia. So it's like an infection, an eye infection. Bernard, how can you? The passage of an old woman with ophthalmia and a disease of the skin distracted her from her indignation. So she's just disgusted. Bernard is making these offensive comments. She doesn't have her drugs, and then this woman walks by with this eye infection and some kind of skin problem, and she's just distracted by all these horrible things happening at one time. "Let's go away," she begged. "I don't like it." But at this moment, their guide came back, and beckoning to them. Remember, beckoning, that's a verb that means come here. So usually if you're beckoning to someone, that could be with your hands. This is beckoning. That means come over to me. Come here. Come here. But it could also be with words. Hey you, come here. That's beckoning to someone. Led the way down the narrow street between the houses. They rounded a corner. A dead dog was lying on a rubbish heap. A heap is a pile. A woman with a goiter. Okay, we better look at a goiter. So we're in this chapter we're going to see all kinds of disturbing things. This is a goiter. I guess it's because of an iron deficiency. So if you don't have iron, I think it's iron. If you don't have iron, this will happen to you. Something becomes swollen in your throat, and then you have a goiter. But at this moment, their guide came back and, beckoning them to follow, led the way down the narrow street between the houses. They rounded a corner. A dead dog was lying on a rubbish heap. A woman with a goiter was looking for lice in the hair of a small child. So lice, those are like the fleas, that make you itch. So there was a woman with a goiter, and she was looking at the head of a child, looking for lice. The guide halted, which means stopped, at the foot of a ladder, raised his hand perpendicularly, and then darted it horizontally forward. They did what he mutely commanded. So mutely means he never said a word. He just used his hands and maybe said, "Go up." Climbed the ladder and walked through the doorway, to which it gave access into a long, narrow room. Rather dark and smelling of smoke and cooked grease and long unwashed clothes, at the further end of the room was another doorway, through which came a shaft of light, and the noise, very loud and close, of the drums. They stepped across the threshold. So the threshold, that's the space between two rooms. It's the doorway space. So when you step across the threshold, you're leaving one area and going into another area. It's like a border. And found themselves on a wide terrace. Below them, shut by the tall houses, was the village square, crowded with Indians, bright blankets and feathers and black hair, and the glint of turquoise. Glint is a word that means like reflecting light. So they're wearing turquoise stones that are reflecting some light. You can see them glint. You can see the reflection of the sun. And the dark skin shining with heat. Lenina put her handkerchief to her nose again. In the open space at the center of the square were the two circular platforms of masonry and trampled clay. When something is trampled, it means many people have walked there and made made a path or made it flat. Let's see. What kind of pictures do we get? Tramp means walk very heavily. Let's look at trampled grass. So you can see in this picture, there's some tall grass on both sides, but there's a space where people have walked many, many times. So remember, to tramp on something means to step very heavily on something. So this is trampled grass, meaning so many people walk there, they have made like a path. You can see some trampled grass in the middle here. Maybe a group of people were sitting there for a long time and they trampled the grass. See, if you just look for trampled, you get some horrible things. You get some horrible pictures of horses and accidents where people get trampled. You see, this person is getting trampled. So we mentioned soccer earlier, right? And in South America, I guess several years ago, there were a lot of problems with people going crazy during soccer matches. And many people got trampled in those situations. Okay, that's enough of this. Let's see, what was trampled here? Hadi says trampled, stamped down with feet. Yes, but you would never say stamped down with feet because you could just say trampled, and that expresses everything without using so many words. In the open space at the center of the square were two circular platforms of masonry and trampled clay, the roofs, it was evident, of underground chambers. For in the center of each platform was an open hatchway. A hatch is a hatch. We talked about that word in the first chapter because we were talking about hatchery. But a hatch is really something, as a noun, a hatch is something like this. It's like a door. But usually it's like a door that you open, the door that goes up instead of a door that opens from the side. And you call that a hatch. The type of car, a car that you can open like this is called a hatchback. Because it has a hatch, you open the door from going from down to up instead of from side to side. We could even say cellar to see a more traditional hatch. I used to live in a house that had one of these. Oh, you can't see it. Why can't you see it? I used to live in a house that had one of these. This is a hatch that goes down into the basement. Hadi says people get trampled in a stampede. Yes, a stampede is when, usually when you talk about a stampede, you're talking about animals like horses or bulls or cows, some kind of big animal in a large group running very fast and refusing to stop no matter what. And that is a stampede. But you can use it to talk about people going crazy for some reason. If you have a big crowd of people and they all decide to run very quickly and refuse to stop, that would be a people stampede. You don't have to say people. You can just say a stampede. But it's usually used for animals. All right, where was the hatch? Oh, a hatchway. So let's see. It was evident of underground chambers, for in the center of each platform was an open hatchway, with a ladder emerging from the lower darkness. The sound of subterranean flute playing came up and was almost lost in the steady, remorseless persistence of the drums. This sounds like a cool place. I think I would like to visit this place. But subterranean, when you see that word terre, Terre, that always means land or earth. That's a Latin word that means land or earth. So when you see subterranean, that means under the land, under the earth. So if something is subterranean, it means it's under the ground. So subterranean flute, somebody is playing the flute, but they're under the ground. But he can hear the music because the hatches are open. Lenina liked the drums. Shutting her eyes, she abandoned herself to their soft, repeated thunder, allowed it to invade her consciousness more and more completely, till at last there was nothing left in the world but that one deep pulse of sound. It reminded her reassuringly of the synthetic noises made at solidarity services and 4-day celebrations. Orgy-porgy, she whispered to herself. These drums beat out just the same rhythms. There was a sudden startling burst of singing, hundreds of male voices crying out fiercely in harsh, metallic unison tones. Harsh means like very extreme, very intense. So if the sun is harsh, if the light of the sun is harsh, it's very extreme, it's very intense. If you treat someone harshly, you are treating them in an extreme way, in an unnecessarily extreme way. If you use harsh words against someone, you are saying very bad words to them, very seriously, unnecessarily intense, strong words. So if the music was harsh, that means it was very intense. So it could be that it was very loud and bad, or it could maybe mean the way the music was put together was very unpleasant in a very intense way. Something like that. The voices crying out fiercely in harsh metallic unison. A few long notes and silence, the thunderous silence of the drums. Then shrill, remember that word shrill? We've talked about that word before, but in case you're watching and you haven't seen that before, or just to remind you what shrill means, let's take a look at a picture that I think everybody can identify with. How will you feel? What is the feeling that you get when you hear this sound? You know, it makes you go like this. Ugh, I hate that. So a shrill, something that's shrill has a very high tone, and it makes you have that feeling. Ugh. So shrill music means it's like this kind of music. Nails on the chalkboard kind of music. There was a sudden, startling burst of singing, hundreds of male voices crying out fiercely in harsh, metallic unison. A few long notes and silence, the thunderous silence of the drums. Then shrill and a neighing treble. Neighing is the sound of a horse. I don't know if that's a very good horse sound, but that's neighing. That's the sound of a horse, the sound a horse makes. The women's answer. Then again the drums, and once more the men's deep, savage affirmation of their manhood. Queer, yes, the place was queer. Queer means strange. So was the music, so were the clothes, and the goiters, and the skin diseases, and the old people. But the performance itself, there seemed to be nothing specially queer about it. It reminds me of a lower caste community sing, she told Bernard. But a little later it was reminding her a good deal less of that innocuous function, for suddenly there had swarmed up from those round chambers underground a ghastly troop of monsters. hideously masked or painted out of all semblance of humanity. Ghastly means horrible or shocking or something like that. And a troop is a group of people, so a ghastly troop of monsters. I guess these are people, but they're being described as monsters, and they're disgusting and shocking, and it's a big group of them. Hideously masked or painted out of... And they're wearing masks, and their faces are painted. They don't even look like people. They had tramped out a strange limping dance round the square. So this group of people with paint on their face and masks, they don't even look like people, they look like monsters, came out from the ground, from these subterranean hatches. And now they're doing some kind of weird, ugly dance in the square, in the town square. Each time a little faster, and the drums had changed and quickened their rhythm, so it became like the pulsing of fever in the airs, and the crowd had begun to sing with the dancers, louder and louder. And first one woman had shrieked. Shrieking is like a scream. A very high-pitched scream. Shrieks are usually shrill. A shrill shriek. And then another and another, as though they were being killed. And then suddenly, the leader of the dancers broke out of the line, ran to a big wooden chest, which was standing at one end of the square, raised the lid, and pulled out a pair of black snakes. A great yell went up from the crowd, and all the other dancers ran towards him with outstretched arms. He tossed the snakes to the first comers, then dipped back into the chest for more and more black snakes and brown, mottled. He flung them out, and then the dance began again, on a different rhythm. Round and round they went with their snakes, snakily, with a soft, undulating movement at the knees and hips, round and round. Then the leader gave a signal, and one after another all the snakes were flung. Flinging is throwing. It's a type of throwing, and it's a very irregular verb. It's fling, flang, flung. So the snakes were flung down in the middle of the square. An old man came up from underground and sprinkled them with cornmeal. Cornmeal is like flour, but it's made from corn. Let me just show you a picture of cornmeal. Well, I love things made out of cornmeal. I love cornbread. And in Mexico, where I live, they make a lot of things out of cornmeal. And they're always delicious. So that's like flour, but it's made from corn instead of wheat. The old man lifted his hand, and startlingly, terrifyingly, there was absolute silence. The drums stopped beating. Life seemed to have come to an end. The old man pointed towards the two hatchways that gave entrance to the lower world, and slowly, raised by invisible hands from below, there emerged from one a painted image of an eagle, from the other that of a man, naked and nailed to a cross. They hung there, seemingly self-sustained, as though watching. The old man clapped his hands, naked but for the white cotton breechcloth. A boy of about 18 stepped out of the crowd and stood before him, his hands crossed over his chest, like this. His hands crossed over his chest, his head bowed. That's bowing. His head bowed. The old man made the sign of the cross over him and turned away. Slowly, the boy began to walk round the writhing heap of snakes. Remember, writhing is the movement of a snake. Zigzag is the movement of a Z, and writhing is kind of the movement of an S. Slowly, the boy began to walk round the writhing heap of snakes. He had completed the first circuit, and was halfway through the second, when from among the dancers a tall man wearing the mask of a coyote, and holding in his hand a whip of plaited leather. Oh, if you're still here, Ali, Hadi, now we have plaited. Remember, so we were talking about braiding and saying the distinction between braiding and plaiting could be that if you're doing braiding, you just use three different groups. But if you're plaiting something, then it could be many different strands. So let's see, plaited whip. And we can see that here it would be appropriate to use the word plaited because that's obviously more than 3. Well, you learn something new every day. Oh, Hadi says bloodied and unbowed. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Wait, let me see. Unbowed, unbowed. I don't even know. Bowed, unbowed. Not having submitted to pressure or demands. So the unbowed word, which is not something that you would probably use in regular conversation, means that you did not submit to the demand. So somebody is beating you saying, do it, do it, do it. And you say, no, I will not do it. You are unbowed. But that's not a common word. That's not something that somebody would use. And it's not really, I mean, here you wouldn't use it because we're not talking about bowed. We're talking about bowed. His head was bowed, meaning his head, when you bow, you do this. So in Japan, if you're saying hello to someone, you bow. But if you bow your head, that is this. And that's bow. Bow. Not bow, but bow. Okay, so let's see. So the coyote man raised his whip. There was a long moment of expectancy, and then a swift means quick, then a swift movement, the whistle of the lash, and its loud, flat-sounding impact on the flesh. The boy's body quivered. So the 18-year-old boy is standing there with his arms crossed and his head bowed. And the coyote man... Oh, wait, I guess we better look at what a coyote is in case you don't know. So there's a man dressed like a coyote. A coyote is it's kind of a dog sort of animal. We have Fari Bors here. Hi, Fari Bors. How are you doing today? This is a coyote. So there's a man wearing a coyote mask. And he whipped the boy who's standing with his arms crossed and his head bowed. I guess it's some kind of religious ceremony. The coyote man raised his whip, and there was a long moment of expectancy, and then a swift, and then the whistle of the lash, and its loud, flat-sounding impact on the flesh. The boy's body quivered. But he made no sound. Oh, so Ali said earlier, bloodied and unbowed. Well, if they're punishing him and he's not sorry, maybe he's unbowed. But we'll see. I don't think this is a punishment. I think it's some kind of religious ritual. And bowed in allegiance. Yes, I mean if you're bowing and agreeing to participate, then I guess you're bowing in allegiance. The boy's body quivered, but he made no sound. He walked on the same slow, steady pace. The coyote struck again, and at every blow, a blow is a hit. At every blow, at first a gasp. That's a gasp. And then a deep groan came from the crowd. The boy walked on. Twice, thrice. You know, you have the word one, but then you have the word once, which means one time. And then you have the word two. And then you have the word twice, which means three times. And then you have the word three and the word thrice, which means three times. But it isn't a very common word anymore. Most people will not say that. And if you use the word thrice, meaning three times, people will probably laugh because it sounds like a very old word, like that something that you would only hear 200 or 300 years ago. I mean, this book, I think, was written in the 1930s. So, but, you know, I think when people write books, they still, they use language that's already dying or dead. And I don't even think that in 1930s, people were saying the word thrice very much. So the boy walked on. Twice, thrice, 4 times round he went. The blood was streaming. 5 times round, 6 times round. Suddenly, Lenina covered her face with her hands and began to sob. Sobbing is crying. Loud, intense crying. "Oh, stop them, she implored. Imploring is begging. Please, please, I'm begging. I implore you, stop. But the whip fell and fell inexorably. Oh, we better look at that word, inexorably. Let's see. That's a fancy word. Inexorably. That's a 50-cent word. Impossible to stop or prevent. 7 times round. Then all at once the boy staggered. We've had that word stagger before. Stagger. Let's just take a look at it again, in case you weren't with us. Staggering is like, imagine if you drink a lot of alcohol, then the way that you walk would be staggering. This poor guy is staggering. Although he has a big smile on his face, so I don't know if he's a poor guy, but I guess if you're in that condition, that doesn't look good. But that's staggering. That's walking with a stagger. So this boy, he's been whipped very hard several times, and he doesn't cry or make any noise. But now that they're finished, or after the 7th time, he's walking away, and he's staggering. Then all at once the boy staggered, and still without a sound, pitched forward onto his face. So he never showed any emotion or made a sound, but after the 7th time, he fell. Bending over him, the old man touched his back with a long white feather, held it up for a moment. Crimson, remember, crimson is the color red, but it's the color red that looks like blood. Crimson for the people to see, and then shook it thrice over the snakes. He shook it 3 times over the snakes. A few drops fell, and suddenly the drums broke out again into a panic of hurrying notes. There was a great shout. The dancers rushed forward, picked up the snakes, and ran out of the square. Men, women, children, all the crowd ran after them. A minute later, the square was empty. Only the boy remained. Prone where he had fallen, quite still, 3 old women came out of one of the houses, and with some difficulty lifted him up and carried him in. The eagle and the man on the cross kept guard for a little while over the empty pueblo. Then, as though they had seen enough, sank slowly down through their hatchways, out of sight, into the nether world. Lenina was still sobbing. "Too awful," she kept repeating, and all Bernard's consolations were in vain. "Too awful, that blood!" She shuddered. Oh, she shuddered. "Oh, I wish I had my Soma." There was the sound of feet in the inner room. Lenina did not move, but sat with her face in her hands. Unseeing, apart, only Bernard turned round. Let's see. Well, Hadi says inexorably, relentlessly, escapably. let's see. Inexorably impossible to stop or prevent. I guess they could be used. They could be used as synonyms depending on the situation, because if inexorable means impossible to prevent or stop, sometimes it would make sense that you could use them as. But relentless just means doesn't stop, and inescapable means you can't run away from it, and so. The difference between inexorable, which I don't think is a very common word, relentless is a common word, but inexorable means you can't stop it. So the implication is you're trying to stop it, but you can't. But relentless just means never stops. Doesn't mean somebody's trying to stop it. Maybe somebody is, but who knows? So that could be the difference, that with inexorable, it could be that someone is trying to stop it, but they can't. And with relentless, it just means it never stops. It doesn't mean somebody's trying to stop it, it just never stops. And inescapable means you can't run away from it. The dress of the young man who now stepped out onto the terrace was Indian. But his plaited hair, isn't that interesting? You bring up this word plaited and suddenly we see it. I've never seen that word before. That's a new word for me, so that's like braided. So the dress of the young man who now stepped out onto the terrace was Indian, but his plaited hair was straw-colored. His eyes pale blue. Straw, they're describing a European-looking person instead of a Native American-looking person. This is straw. So they're saying he's Indian. They're saying that he's part of this culture or Native American, but they're describing someone with European features. So this is straw. He has straw-colored hair. Let's go back and read that. So the dress of the young man who now stepped out of the terrace was Indian. So he was wearing Indian clothes. He was wearing native clothes. But his plaited hair was straw-colored, and his eyes were a pale blue. Pale means not very much color, light-colored. And his skin was white skin, bronzed. "Hello, good morrow," said the stranger, in faultless but peculiar English. "You're civilized, aren't you? You come from the other place outside the reservation." "What on earth?" Bernard began in astonishment. The young man sighed and shook his head. "A most unhappy gentleman." And pointing to the bloodstains in the center of the square, "Do you see that damned spot?" he asked in a voice that trembled with emotion. "A gram is better than a dam," said Lenina mechanically from behind her hands. "I wish I had my Selma." "I ought to have been there," the young man went on. "Why wouldn't they let me be the sacrifice?" "Oh, so this is a sacrifice. This boy was sacrificed, and I guess they killed him." Why wouldn't they let me be the sacrifice? I'd have gone round 10 times, 12 times, 15 times. Palotiwa only got as far as 7. They could have had twice as much blood from me. The multitudinous seas of incarnadine. He flung out his arms in a lavish gesture, then despairingly let them fall again. But they wouldn't let me. They disliked me for my complexion. It's always been like that. Always. Tears stood in the young man's eyes. He was ashamed and turned away. Astonishment made Lenina forget the deprivation of Soma. She uncovered her face and for the first time looked at the stranger. "Do you mean to say that you wanted to be hit with that whip?" She still averted from her. Averted means not looking at her. So she's talking to him, but he's not looking at her. He's looking a different way. The young man made the sign of affirmation. "For the sake of the pueblo. to make the rain come and the corn grow, and to please Pukong and Jesus. And then to show that I can bear pain without crying out. Yes. Oh, so maybe they don't kill them, but they get hurt. They get very hurt. And his voice suddenly took on a new resonance. He turned with a proud squaring of his shoulders, a proud defiant lifting of the chin, to show that I am a man. Oh. He gave a gasp, and was silent, gaping. He had seen for the first time in his life the face of a girl whose cheeks were not the color of chocolate or dog skin, whose hair was auburn. Auburn is like a light-colored brown. I think. I better check. Let's see. Auburn hair. Yeah. So it's... But this is more like I guess a reddish brown. Auburn. This is auburn hair. Not dark brown. Whose hair was auburn and permanently waved, and whose expression, amazing novelty, was one of benevolent that's half a word. I can't read that word. Interest? There's something wrong there. The print is off. Lenina was smiling at him. Such a nice-looking boy. She was thinking, and a really beautiful body. The blood rushed up into the young man's face. He dropped his eyes, raised them again for a moment, only to find her smiling at him, and was so much overcome that he had to turn away and pretend to be looking very hard at something on the other side of the square. So she's attracted to him. She finds him attractive, and she's looking at him in a way that makes him feel uncomfortable. So he has to look the other way, pretend that he's looking at something else because he's embarrassed. Bernard's questions made a diversion. Who? How? Went? From where? Keeping his eyes fixed on Bernard's face, for so passionately did he long to see Lenina smiling that he simply dared not look at her. Oh, he's attracted to her too, which makes it extra embarrassing. He's very embarrassed by that, so he's avoiding looking at her. The young man tried to explain himself. Linda and he... Linda was his mother. The word made Lenina look uncomfortable. Were strangers in the reservation. Linda had come from the other place long ago, before he was born, with a man who was his father. Bernard pricked up his ears. That means he went like this. You know, like suddenly he's paying attention. His ears, you could see his ears focusing on what the boy is saying. She had gone walking alone in those mountains over there to the north, had fallen down a steep place and hurt her head. Go on, said Bernard excitingly. Some hunters from Malpais had found her and brought her to the pueblo. As for the man who was his father, Linda had never seen him again. His name was Tomakin. Yes, Thomas. That was DHC's first name. So remember, Bernard's boss told him this story of, I went to the Savage Reservation once with a girl, and she was stupid and she got lost, and I had to leave without her. So that's the girl. That's his mother, and this boy is his boss's son. That's a really big, horrible thing to do, to have a son or have a child, because people don't have parents anymore. They're born in jars in a laboratory, and if you it's considered disgusting to have children the natural way. So I wonder how his boss will feel about that when if he discovers that he has a natural son. He must have flown away back to the other place, without her, a bad, unkind, unnatural man. And so I was born in Malpais, he concluded, in Malpais, and he shook his head. The squalor of that little house in the outskirts of the pueblo. A space of dust and rubbish separated it from the village. 2 famine-stricken dogs were nosing obscenely in the garbage at its door. Inside, they entered. The twilight stank and was loud with flies. "Linda," the young man called. From the inner room, a rather hoarse female voice said, coming, "If you have a hoarse voice, you have a very deep voice like this. If you're if you're sick and you're coughing a lot, maybe for a few days you'll talk like this." That's a hoarse voice. That's not horse like HORSE, like the animal that you can ride, but it's horse HOARSE. They sound exactly the same, but hoarse is when your voice sounds like this. Could be from yelling, could be from reading books for too long online, like me. It could be from being sick. You could have a hoarse voice for many reasons. From the inner room, a rather hoarse female voice said, "Coming." They waited. In bowls on the floor were remains of a meal, perhaps of several meals. The door opened and a very stout kind of means fat, a very stout blonde squaw. Squaw is a Native American word for woman, but I guess it's not a nice word, it's a disrespectful word, so you shouldn't use it. But you still might see it, for example, in a book like this from a long time ago. The door opened and a very stout blonde squaw stepped across the threshold and stood looking at the strangers, staring incredulously. Remember, incredulous means, I don't believe it. Her mouth open. Lenina noticed with disgust that 2 of the front teeth were missing, and the color of the ones that remained. She shuddered. It was more than the old man, so fat, and all the lines in her face, and the flabbiness, the wrinkles. Flabby, that's how you describe somebody who's fat. I don't know what kind of pictures we'll get if we look at flabby. Okay. Let's take a look at flabby. See, this is flabby. That means like I've got flabby arms. Like when you do this, it jiggles, it moves. What was the word that we were using before? Wobbles. It wobbles when you move it. That's being flabby. So if you're flabby, it's kind of the opposite of tight. If you're talking about skin, is flabby. So it could be used to describe a very old person, or it could be used to describe an overweight person. She shuddered. Ugh. It was worse than the old man, so fat, and all the lines in her face, and the flabbiness, the wrinkles, and the sagging cheeks with those purplish blotches, and the red veins on her nose and the bloodshot eyes, and that neck, and that blanket she wore over her head, ragged and filthy, and under the brown sack-shaped tunic, those enormous breasts, the bulge of the stomach, the hips. Oh, much worse than the old man, much worse. And suddenly, the creature burst out in a torrent of speech, rushed at her with outstretched arms, and Ford! It was too revolting. In another moment, she'd be sick, pressed her against the bulge, the bosom, and began to kiss her. So his mother, Lenina, is disgusted by her, but for some reason this woman is very happy to see her and gives her a big hug, which is making Lenina sick. Pressed her against the bulge and the bosom and began to kiss her. Ford, to kiss, slobberingly, and smelt too horrible. Slobber is like if you have a lot of saliva in your mouth. Not so nice way of saying that is slobber, calling it slobber. Let's see what happens if we get pictures of slobber. See, actually, the thing I thought of when I first saw that word is a dog. Because of this. This is slobber. So if somebody gives you a big wet kiss and you don't like it, you say, stop slobbering on me. Stop slobbering all over me. But slobber is like the wet, very wet mouth. And I usually think of dogs when I think of slobber. How do they use it here? So, Ford, to kiss slobberingly and smelt too horrible, obviously never had a bath and simply reeked of that beastly stuff that was put into the Delta and Epsilon bottles. So, to reek means to smell very bad. So, the woman reeked because she never bathed. She smelled very horrible. And she was slobbering all over Lenina. She was giving her big, wet, disgusting kisses. No, it wasn't true about Bernard, but positively stank of alcohol. She broke away quickly, so she, get away from me, as quickly as she could, and blubbered. Blubbering is crying. Blubbering is a type of that's blubbering. And distorted face confronted her, and the creature was crying, "Oh, my dear, the torrent of words flowed sobbingly. If you knew how glad, after all these years, a civilized face, yes, and civilized clothes, because I thought I should never see a piece of real acetate silk again." She fingered the sleeve of Lenina's shirt. So she took Lenina's shirt and she did this. The nails were black, and those adorable viscose velveteen shorts. Do you know, dear, I still got my old clothes, the ones I came in, put away in a box. I'll show them to you afterwards, though of course the acetate has all gone into holes, but such a lovely white bandolier. Though I must say your green morocco is even lovelier. Not that it did me much good, that bandolier. Her tears began to flow again. I suppose John told you what I had to suffer. And not a gram of soma to be had, only to drink of mezcal every now and then. When Pope used to bring it. Pope is a boy I used to know. But it makes you feel so bad afterwards, the mezcal does. That's a real drink. That's similar to tequila, if you've ever had tequila. Mezcal is a very similar type of drink. And you're sick with the peyote. Well, I think that's peyote. Peyote is a type of, I don't know, is it a mushroom or a fungus that grows, here in Mexico, but also I think in the southwestern United States where New Mexico is. And if you eat it, or smoke it, I think smoke it, or maybe both. If you eat it or smoke it, then you will hallucinate. You will have very strong hallucinations for several hours. Besides, it always made that awful feeling of being ashamed much worse the next day. And I was so ashamed. Just think of it. Me, a beta, having a baby. Put yourself in my place. The mere suggestion made Lenina shudder. Oh, shudder. Though it wasn't my fault, I swear. Because I still don't know how it happened, seeing that I did all the Malthusian drill, you know, by numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, always, I swear it. But all the same, it happened. And of course, there wasn't anything like an abortion center here. Is it still down in Chelsea, by the way? She asked Lenina. Lenina nodded. And still floodlighted on Tuesdays and Fridays? Lenina nodded again. That lovely pink glass tower. Poor Linda lifted her face and with closed eyes ecstatically contemplated the bright, remembered image. And the river at night. And the river at night? She whispered. Great tears oozed slowly out from between her tight-shut eyelids. And flying back in the evening from Stoke Poges? and then a hot bath and a vibro vacuum massage. But there. She drew a deep breath, shook her head, opened her eyes again, sniffed once or twice, then blew her nose on her fingers. And what she blew her nose on her fingers, and then she wiped them on her tunic. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, in response to Lenina's involuntary grimace of disgust. So when that happened, Lenina went, "Ugh." And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I oughtn't to have done that. I'm very sorry. But what are you to do when there aren't any handkerchiefs? I remember how it used to upset me, all that dirt and nothing being aseptic. I had an awful cut in my head when they first brought me here. You can't imagine what they used to put on it. Filth. Just filth. Civilization is sterilization, I used to say to them. And streptocock G to Banbury T. I have no idea what that means. To see a fine bathroom and WC. Well, I think streptococcus is some kind of infection. And Banbury tea, I don't know what that refers to. Banbury. What happens if we... Banbury tea. Well, Banbury is a historic market town in England. But, let's see, Brave New World, Streptococcus to... There's something specifically about this line in the book. Let's see if I can find it quickly. I don't know. There are too many of these. Maybe I should ask. Should I try to ask ChatGPT? Let's see if ChatGPT knows. Streptococcus to Banbury tea is part of a hypnopedic phrase, the form of sleep teaching. This particular phrase is nonsensical and doesn't have a specific meaning within the context of the story. Instead, it serves as an example to use hypnopedia to indoctrinate. Okay, it doesn't mean anything. Oh, well, we wasted all that time looking it up, and it doesn't mean anything. Okay. But of course, they didn't understand. How should they? And in the end, I suppose, I got used to it. And anyhow, how can you keep things clean when there isn't hot water laid on? And look at these clothes. This beastly wool isn't like acetate. It lasts and it lasts, and you're supposed to mend it if it gets torn. But I'm a beta. I worked in the fertilizing room. Nobody ever taught me to do anything like that. It wasn't my business. Besides, it never used to be right to mend clothes. Throw them away when they've got holes in them, and buy new. The more stitches, the less riches. Isn't that right? Mending's antisocial, but it's all different here. It's like living with lunatics. Everything they do is mad. She looked round, saw John and Bernard had left them and were walking up and down in the dust and garbage outside the house. But nonetheless, confidentially, lowering her voice and leaning while Lenina stiffened and shrank, so close to them the blown reek of embryo poison stirred the hair on her cheek. For instance, she hoarsely whispered, take the way they have one another here. Mad, Jay. Mad, I tell you. Absolutely mad. Everybody belongs to everyone else, don't they? Don't they? She insisted, tugging at Lenina's sleeve. Tugging is when you go like this. So this is a sleeve, and this is tugging. It's like a little pull. Don't they? Lenina nodded her averted head, let out a breath. She had been holding, so this woman smells very bad, so Lenina is holding her breath. She's not breathing, but finally she had to breathe. Lenina nodded her averted head, let out a breath she had been holding, and managed to draw another one, relatively untainted. Well, here, the other went on, nobody's supposed to belong to more than one person, and if you have people in the ordinary way, the others think you're wicked and antisocial. They hate and despise you. Once a lot of women came and made a scene because their men came to see me. Well, why not? And then they rushed at me. No, it was too awful. I can't tell you about it. Linda covered her face with her hands and, shuddered. They're so hateful. The women here, mad and cruel. And of course, they don't know anything about Malthusian drill, or bottles, or decanting, or anything of that sort. So they're having children all the time like dogs. It's too revolting. And to think that Ford, and yet John was great comfort to me. I don't know what I should have done without him, even though he did get so upset whenever a man, quite as a tiny boy even, once, but that was when he was bigger, he just tried to kill poor Husiwa, or was it Pope? Just because I used to have them sometimes. Because I never could make him understand that that was what civilized people ought to do. Being mad's infectious. I don't understand that phrase. Being mad's infectious, I believe. Anyhow, John seemed to have caught it from the Indians, because of course he was with them a lot, even though they were always so beastly to him, and wouldn't let him do all the things the other boys did, which was a good thing in a way, because it made him easier for me to condition him a little. Though you've no idea how difficult that is. There's so much one doesn't know. It wasn't my business to know. I mean, when a child asks you how a helicopter works, or what made the world, well, what are you to answer? Or who made the world? Well, what are you to answer if you're a beta and have always worked in the fertilizing room? What are you to answer? Okay, well, that was the end of Chapter 7 of Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Thank you, everyone who stayed and listened. I think I'm going to do this tomorrow. I just want to check my schedule, because I haven't been able to read much lately. I've been kind of busy, and I want to do this usually at the same time. Yeah, it looks like I can do it. I'll read the next chapter again tomorrow at around the same time. All right, well, thanks for watching, and I hope that you come back tomorrow. I think later on this afternoon, I'm going to do some intonation practice. So it will just be practice using dialogues from a comic book, just practicing some basic intonation, nothing too fancy. We're just doing that slowly. I think that's a very important thing, to get the rhythm or the music of English. And I'll be doing that, I guess, maybe, I don't know, in a few hours after I take a little break. So if you're interested in that, watch out for me. I'll be back later today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.